June 22nd, 1941. For 30, the western plains of the Soviet Union near Brest. The air trembled with the roar of over 3,000 engines. Dust and diesel hung heavy, blurring the horizon. You feel the ground shake beneath the endless line of German panzers. Panther, Panzer III, Panzer IV, rolling eastward like a steel river. Soldiers clung to their tanks, faces set in grim determination, the early morning sun glinting off polished gun barrels. General Heinz Guderian, perched atop his command panzer, scanned the vast plains through binoculars. His mind raced, heart steady, ego unshakable. Moscow was a prize. The Soviet defenses, he believed, were paper, fragile, slow, unready. Around him, radio chatter crackled with precision. 1st Panzer Division advancing. 2nd Panzer Division flanking east. Luftwaffe reports clear skies ahead. Overhead, the Luftwaffe's Heinkel 111s and Stukas slice the sky, wings dark against the rising sun, raining bombs on unsuspecting border towns. Smoke twisted like serpents into the clouds. You can hear the whine of propellers and the distant thud of explosives. Villages burned, but the panzer crews barely flinched. Every kilometer gained felt like destiny affirming itself. Yet, behind the confident clatter of treads, a silent threat waited. The mud of early Russian summer, treacherous and deep, clung to wheels and tracks. Unseen marshes swallowed engines whole. Guderian's intelligence had underestimated the sheer scale of terrain. The endless forests, rivers, and swamps were not obstacles. They were traps in waiting. A young lieutenant, clutching his map, caught Guderian's eye. "Sir, the forward scouts report heavy resistance near Smolensk." Guderian's smile was slight, almost imperceptible. Resistance? He had expected some pockets of Red Army soldiers, scattered units clinging to outdated fortifications. Nothing that could stop the Wehrmacht's precision. Nothing that could challenge the godlike power of mechanized warfare. And yet, somewhere deep in the Russian expanse, a drumbeat of artillery began to echo. Not close, not threatening, at first, but each report carried a subtle message. The Soviets were mobilizing, and not in fits and starts. They were moving with a terrible, inexorable coordination, a force invisible from the skies, yet formidable enough to challenge the Panzer juggernaut. The tanks surged forward. You feel the heat from their engines, smell the burning oil and dust, see the gleam of steel as commanders bark orders through intercoms. Soldiers grip rifles while tank gunners adjust sights, eyes narrowing at the distant tree line. Somewhere a shell explodes, hurling earth into the air like a violent signal. The Wehrmacht believed they were unstoppable, believed that weeks, not months, would decide the fate of Moscow. Each village taken, each road cleared, fed this belief. Confidence grew like a wildfire in every armored corps, blinding them to the creeping danger. Guderian, brilliant tactician, visionary Blitzkrieg, believed he could bend Russia to his will. But Russia does not bend. It does not submit. As the first rays of sun burned through the smoke of smoldering villages, a chilling wind swept across the plains, carrying with it the faint, distant rumbles of counterattacks. Somewhere unseen, the Red Army was awakening, and with it, the illusion of invincibility would begin to shatter. July 15th, 1941. 7 o'clock, near Smolensk, western Russia. The Panzer divisions had pushed deeper into Soviet territory than anyone imagined possible. The earth beneath the treads was churned into mud, a bitter, sticky morass that clung to wheels and men alike. You can see the exhausted faces of tank crews, sweat mixed with dust, eyes red from the glare of the sun, and the acrid smoke curling from destroyed villages. The wind carries a strange metallic scent, burnt steel, scorched timber, and the faint, haunting perfume of human fear. Guderian rides forward in his command tank, binoculars press to his eyes. "Advance!" he orders, voice cold, precise. The 2nd and 3rd Panzer divisions pivot around the Dnieper's tributaries, confident, unstoppable. But every kilometer forward stretches supply lines thinner, leaving fuel trucks and ammunition lorries vulnerable to sudden attacks. Radio chatter becomes tense, sporadic. Reports of destroyed vehicles, ambushed convoys, and isolated units screaming for reinforcements. In the forest edges, Soviet scouts disappear into the trees. Snipers fire with eerie precision, punctuating the air with the sharp crack of rifles. Small arms fire echoes through the treetops, invisible but relentless. Infantry advances behind concealed bunkers and hidden artillery, forcing panzer crews to rethink every move. The Germans are masters of speed and shock, but here, in this endless, rugged terrain, speed becomes a liability and arrogance turns into hesitation. Night falls. Campfires flicker, illuminating the gaunt faces of exhausted soldiers. They eat cold rations in silence, the distant thud of artillery never ceasing. Some whisper of frost, of nights growing colder than any man can endure. Already, the first hints of Russia's merciless winter are felt. Not in temperature yet, but in the unyielding landscape. Snow is months away, yet every river crossing, every swamp, every bog signals a coming nightmare. By mid-July, the Red Army's tactics begin to reveal themselves. Counterattacks are not heroic charges, but calculated strikes. Cutting supply lines, isolating armored spearheads, forcing tanks into traps. The Panzer divisions, previously an unstoppable steel tide, now hesitate. Orders arrive too late. Convoys vanish overnight. Guderian's communications are stretched to the breaking point. He begins to sense the enormity of the land, the cunning of the enemy, and the first seeds of doubt slip into even his iron will. A young sergeant, crawling through mud, reports a sight that freezes the blood of his comrades. Columns of Soviet T-34 tanks emerging from concealed ridges. Unlike any German model they faced, these machines are fast, heavily armored, impervious to the Panzer IV's main guns. Sir, T-34s. They're everywhere, he says, voice trembling. Guderian watches through his binoculars. Steel monsters gleaming under the morning sun, moving like predators through the forest. The Wehrmacht's confidence, once absolute, wavers. For the first time, the elite Panzer divisions face the brutal reality of an enemy that refuses to yield. Not just resistance, strategy. Not just firepower, innovation. And as artillery shells scream across frozen fields in prelude to chaos, the illusion of invincibility begins to crumble. Somewhere, deep in the shadows of the forest, Soviet commanders smile grimly. They have waited, bided time, and now the Panzer Army is exposed, its arrogance on full display. The first true taste of catastrophe is imminent. August 10th, 1941. 5:45. Approaching Vyazma, central Russia. The morning fog crawls over the fields like a living thing, muffling the distant thunder of artillery. Panzer crews squint through the gray haze, boots slick with mud, hands trembling on controls. The 2nd and 3rd Panzer divisions have advanced nearly 200 kilometers into Soviet territory, yet the farther they push, the more the landscape seems to push back. Roads that once seemed straightforward are now rivers of quagmire, snaking through forests and marshes, limiting speed, exposing flanks. Guderian's command tank moves cautiously at the head of the column. His face is pale beneath the brim of his officer's cap. Intelligence reports are fragmented. Some units unaccounted for, supply trucks missing. The Soviets are here, they're everywhere, murmurs a young lieutenant, as the rhythmic clatter treads fills the tense silence. Suddenly, the horizon bursts into fire. Artillery shells explode around the advancing panzers, throwing earth and debris into the air. Soviet Katyushas launch a salvo from concealed ridges, the ground vibrating with the intensity of the strikes. Panzer crews scramble to respond. Smoke, dust, and the acrid smell of cordite overwhelm the senses. Tanks pivot, guns swivel, but every maneuver is slow, every adjustment costly. Then comes a chilling realization. The columns are surrounded. Soviet infantry infiltrates the flanks, cutting off escape routes. T-34s advance from unexpected directions, armored deflecting shells with terrifying ease. Communication lines falter. Units isolated, stranded, forced to fight in fragments. German officers shout orders over the din, but the chaos is deafening, indecipherable. The map of victory, once so clear, now dissolves into a landscape of uncertainty and death. Panzer crews fight desperately to hold position, but the Soviet strategy is relentless. pincer movements, ambushes in forests, mined roads. Guderian's mechanized spearhead, once unstoppable, grinds against the invisible weight of a cunning enemy. Commanders note the loss of tanks, ammunition, and morale. Entire divisions teeter on collapse. Soldiers huddle behind the armored hulks, aware of the looming encirclement but powerless to break it. Amid the chaos, human stories surface. A young driver weeps silently over a disabled tank, thinking of home. A veteran gunner, coughing from smoke, calculates each shot as if every round could stave off oblivion. The air is thick with the smell of fear, sweat, and burning fuel. The battlefield is no longer a place of strategy. It is survival. Guderian, watching through binoculars, feels the first real sting of doubt. His plans, meticulous, precise, audacious, are collapsing under conditions he never anticipated. The enemy he dismissed as backward, disorganized, is revealing itself as disciplined, relentless, and adaptive. Panic is subtle but spreading. Confidence, once a tangible force, begins to crack. From the forest to the open plains, German forces are hemmed in. Roads are blocked by felled trees and destroyed vehicles. Tanks immobilized in mud become immobile targets. Overhead, the Luftwaffe struggles to provide cover against mass Soviet air attacks. Every hour, the grip tightens. The Panzer divisions, symbols of German might, are caught in a vice that tightens with ruthless efficiency. And in the quiet, between the roar of guns, one thought pierces through. Arrogance brought them here, and now it might destroy them. October 5th, 1941. 6:30, approaching Vyazma, Russia. The first frost bites through the night, coating tanks in a brittle glaze. Steam rises from engines that grind slower. Tires and treads choke with frozen mud. Soldiers awaken, hands numb from the cold, breath clouding in the pre-dawn air. Each inhale sharp as shattered glass. You can hear the crunch of ice beneath boots, the metallic groan of tanks shivering against temperatures they were never designed to endure. Guderian rides forward, wrapped in a greatcoat, staring at the horizon. The forest lines that once seemed distant and manageable are now jagged walls, snow-laden, silent, and hiding enemies. Reports of frostbite, immobilized vehicles, and stalled columns flood his radio. Logistics falter. Fuel gels, ammunition freezes. Supplies vanish into a landscape that grows more hostile by the day. The once confident spearhead begins to resemble a dispersed, vulnerable prey. The Red Army strikes with precision that seems almost preordained. Soviet riflemen emerge from snow-laden trenches, firing from positions unseen. T-34s glide over frozen marshes, their tracks biting into ice and mud alike. Artillery shells tear through the morning stillness, flinging men and metal into the air. Panzer crews, exhausted and disoriented, struggle to respond. Tanks freeze in place, engines coughing, wheels locked against frost. Communication is near impossible. Radio signals falter in the cold. Misfires are common, and orders arrive too late to save encircled units. Soldiers dig foxholes in frozen earth, their breath misting in the air, eyes darting to every tree lean, every shadow, every movement that could signal death. You feel the desperation, the relentless pressure of a winter that is no longer weather, but weapon. Guderian, a master of Blitzkrieg, realizes a horrifying truth. His strategy depends on speed, coordination, and mobility. Here, all three are collapsing. Supply convoys stuck in frozen mud, tank engines failing, roads turned into rivers of ice. Even Luftwaffe support is limited. Fighters grounded, bombers slipping on frozen runways. His forces are trapped, the Panzer spearhead immobilized, and the enemy, once thought weak, now encircles him with patience and fury. Amid the cold, human endurance is tested. Soldiers huddle together in tanks, sharing body heat, praying silently for the next warm ration or cup of tea. Frostbite steals fingers, toes, and morale alike. Artillery crews operate with frozen hands. Rifles jam in the biting cold, and every mile forward becomes a nightmare of resistance terrain in the cruel hand of nature itself. And yet, through the haze of smoke, frost, and despair, Soviet commanders push relentlessly. Counterattacks exploit every weakness. Isolated tanks are destroyed, supply lines cut, retreat routes ambushed. The mighty Panzer divisions, once symbols of unstoppable German ingenuity, are now fragmented, disoriented, and bleeding. In the dead silence of a frostbitten morning, Guderian knows the impossible is coming. Months of planning, years of preparation, the pride of the Wehrmacht, all now threatened by winter, terrain, and an enemy that refuses to yield. And as he watches another column of T-34s emerge in the tree line, a single thought pierces through the bitter cold. This is no longer an advance. This is a fight for survival. November 20th, 1941. 8 o'clock. Near Vyazma, western Russia. The panzer divisions are gasping under the relentless grip of winter. Engines that once roar like beasts now cough, splutter, and stall. Mud turned to ice grips every track and wheel. You can hear the metallic screech of immobilized tanks, the low moans of men shivering inside them, and the distant rhythmic thunder of Soviet artillery. Each shell hits with precision. Each blast another chisel striking away at the illusion of German invincibility. Guderian rides at the head of his command column, coat pulled tight, scarf pressed against his face. His eyes, once sharp and confident, now scan the horizon with mounting dread. Reports arrive fragmented, delayed. 2nd Panzer Division trapped near a frozen river, fuel trucks abandoned, armored columns immobilized and surrounded. Radio crackles with chaos, commands arriving too late, voices trembling, shouting, pleading. Orders to retreat meet frozen roads, blocked by wrecked vehicles and advancing Soviet forces. The Red Army moves with terrifying coordination. T-34s and KV-1s pierce through gaps, their guns cutting tanks apart with impunity. Infantrymen emerge from snow-laden forests, firing with deadly efficiency, fortified by supply lines that remain intact. Every advance the Germans make is met by counterattack, ambush, or the harsh hand of winter itself. Panzer crews fight tooth and nail. Yet the battlefield is no longer theirs. It belongs to the Soviets and the unforgiving terrain. Guderian's elite armored spearhead, once unstoppable, is breaking. Men huddle in tanks, sharing warmth, nursing frostbite, gripping weapons as hope dwindles. Mechanical failures abound. Engines frozen, tracks broken, ammunition wet or inaccessible. Retreat is a slow crawl over snow and ice, punctuated by artillery, rifle fire, and the sickening crunch of steel twisted under impact. Every kilometer costs lives. Every breath is a struggle. Among the chaos, human courage surfaces. A tank commander sacrifices his vehicle to cover retreating comrades, exploding his Panzer IV to block a T-34 advance. Soldiers drag frozen comrades from wrecked tanks. Engineers attempt to repair engines in sub-zero temperatures, fingers bleeding and numb. Yet heroism cannot turn the tide alone. The Wehrmacht's precision, coordination, and speed, its lifeblood, have been drained by the twin enemies of winter and strategy. Guderian himself faces the impossible. His masterful planning has failed, not because of lack of skill, but because the land and enemy refuse to yield. Entire divisions are trapped in pockets, starving, freezing, fighting desperately to hold what ground remains. The battlefield is littered with wreckage. Tanks, trucks, guns, bodies. Smoke rises from every village, every road, every open field. The deafening roar of engines is replaced by the eerie silence of immobilized death. And yet, even as the Panzer divisions collapse, the German High Command refuses to fully grasp the scale of the catastrophe. Reinforcements are planned, optimism maintained, but in the shadows of Vyazma, winter, terrain, and Soviet cunning have rewritten the rules of war. The arrogance of the Blitzkrieg has met its nemesis. The first true whispers of defeat ripple through the armored corps. The soldiers know it, the officers sense it, and Guderian feels it in his bones. Arrogance, confidence, speed, all betrayed by the vastness of Russia and the relentlessness of its defenders. Somewhere ahead, the Red Army prepares the final cordon. Escape, even for the elite panzer units, is uncertain. And the Wehrmacht faces a question it has never confronted before. Can brilliance survive against nature, scale, and strategy combined? December 5th, 1941. 9 o'clock. The outskirts of Vyazma, Russia. Snow falls steadily, a relentless white shroud that masks the devastation below. The ground is a treacherous mix of ice, frozen mud, and debris from shattered vehicles. You can hear the hollow groans of tanks trapped in frost, the scraping of steel on ice, and the sharp crack of distant rifle fire cutting through the stillness. The once mighty Panzer divisions, symbols of German might and precision, are fractured, immobilized, and slowly suffocating under the weight of winter and strategic cunning. Guderian rides in silence atop his command panzer, eyes scanning a battlefield that has become unrecognizable. Villages burned, roads blocked by wreckage, columns of frozen vehicles stretching as far as the eye can see. Fuel and ammunition are nearly exhausted. Soldiers huddle for warmth, faces pale from frostbite, eyes haunted by exhaustion and fear. The air carries a bitter scent of smoke, metal, and death. The invincible Blitzkrieg that promised triumph has become a slow, agonizing crawl toward survival. The Red Army presses relentlessly. Soviet tanks maneuver through snow-draped forests, cutting off retreat routes. Infantry strikes emerge from concealed positions. Every attack calculated, every move deliberate. Ambushes in the frozen wasteland make every advance deadly. Each panzer destroyed, each division isolated, signals the collapse of what was once considered invulnerable. The mechanized spearhead of Guderian, a force that once seemed unstoppable, now lies vulnerable to winter, terrain, and the unyielding resolve of the Soviet defenders. Amid the chaos, human stories of desperation and courage unfold. Soldiers carry wounded comrades through snow, engineers work on frozen engines, and officers make impossible choices between covering retreats or attempting to regroup. But the battlefield has shifted. Speed, precision, and coordination, once the lifeblood of German tactics, are crushed under immobility, starvation, and relentless Soviet pressure. Guderian realizes the unthinkable. His plan, brilliant on paper, cannot overcome the vastness of Russia, the brutality of winter, and the ingenuity of an enemy underestimated at every turn. The arrogance that carried him and his elite panzer divisions deep into Soviet territory now threatens to annihilate them. Every kilometer gained comes at the cost of tanks, men, and morale. Victory, once certain, has slipped beyond reach. And then comes the final reckoning. Entire panzer corps encircled, trapped in frozen pockets. Ammunition dwindles. Soldiers fire until barrels overheat and then pray as silence falls, broken only by the crunch of boots in snow and the distant roar of Soviet tanks. The battlefield, once a theater of German dominance, now bears witness to the catastrophic limits of arrogance and hubris. From the horizon, smoke curls upward from burning villages and destroyed machinery. Guderian watches as the Red Army consolidates, sealing the fate of those who remain. The Wehrmacht, disciplined, trained, and confident, has met an enemy as unforgiving as the land itself. From arrogance to defeat, the panzer divisions have learned a harsh, immutable lesson. In the vastness of Russia, no amount of planning, speed, or confidence can overcome winter, terrain, and a resolute enemy. The thunder of engines that once heralded victory now echoes as a warning for future generations. The German advance has stalled. Moscow remains unconquered. And the dream of Blitzkrieg is shattered